All right, folks, you're in tune to another edition of the radio show with Mark Lee. And of course, we're excited to have some more great guests on and everything of that nature. Of course, we've been having the privilege of having a lot of great guests here on IBM.TV. Of course, we've had folks on like Ira David Wood, Deidre Hodge, and a number of others as well. And of course, a lot of folks are paying attention to what's going on in the world, whether that's the world of sports, because I know that a couple of games were delayed even into Tuesday because of folks testing for COVID and things of that nature. I know that Bill Tresvant, one of our regular folks, is a Buffalo Bills fan, and that's one of the games that was postponed until Tuesday at this particular point. And of course, a lot of folks were watching the NBA Finals and were checking out the Lakers claiming that title. That's right, the Lakers went ahead and won the title. And I know a lot of folks already were thinking that that was going to happen. And then I made the mistake, and yes, I did call it the mistake, of watching the Senate confirmation hearings for the lady that is being nominated for the Supreme Court judge and all of that. So I made the mistake of watching that and saw a lot of people that were making arguments that did not seem to be making a lot of sense, in my opinion. And I actually think that they should be waiting until after the elections and not trying to rush into these decisions at this particular time. I mean, there's a lot of folks that might disagree with me, and if that's the case, they are allowed to that opinion. But I just think that this is a little bit too fast and too quick, and there are more pressing matters at hand. I know a number of folks that are looking forward to trying to get some financial relief and things of that nature because, we had that one stimulus package and we're waiting for a second stimulus package. And of course, that's being held up in the Congress and things of that nature. So definitely we're seeing that on a regular basis. And that's what I actually think they should be concentrating on if I had my opinions and if they would listen to me. But I'm just one voice among many citizen voices. And that's what I've got to say about that. But definitely we're seeing a lot of folks that are involved in a lot of issues around the community. And of course, we're seeing a lot of folks that are doing innovative things, like even trying to have performances during this time. I know a friend of mine did a performance at the Blue Note Grill, and they actually also aired it virtually. But I did see on the virtual airings that there were some people there live. And of course, we do know that we've heard that Broadway is going to be shut down till either May or June because of what is going on around the country. And of course, we're always glad to have amazing guests and things of that nature. So that being said, I'm going to bring in our guest for this afternoon. We might be joined by another one later on, but I want to bring in Tobin Mueller. And Tobin Mueller is joining us from his part of the world and everything. So I want to say hello, Tobin. How are you doing? I was glad to be able to meet you through the wonders of the World Wide Web and all of that kind of stuff. But I know that you are definitely involved in the music world. And if you could talk to our listeners about how you got involved in the music world. You've been in it for a long time, and I know that I even in reading your bio had heard that some people might credit you as being one of the founders of what some people call new age music and things of that nature. But I know that you don't even like that title, but I would love to hear you talk about your music background and things of that nature, and then we'll get into other conversations as well.
Well, thanks, Mark. It's really great to be here, and I'm really, really happy that you contacted me. I never used LinkedIn, and that you contacted me through LinkedIn was really great. So, I've been musical my entire life. I'm the youngest of four, and it's from a very, very musical family. Everybody was a great musician. I had to be just to keep up. And I would get the hand-me-down instruments and then have to get the one that no one else wanted. But then when I got old enough, which was about fifth grade, I got to choose a saxophone. And I've always loved jazz. My mother was a jazz singer. By the time I was 14, I was actually accompanying her. So my entire schooling of jazz was intense until I got to the age of, I'd say 16, when I would actually be taught it. I was taught so much by my siblings and my mom. My grandfather's favorite musician was Debussy. And I look back at my own jazz, which sounds a bit like impressionist jazz. And it's as if Debussy were alive 2 generations later and had been a jazz musician that had great contacts on Broadway. That's what my music sounds like, I think. So, yeah. So I started off really, by the time I was out of high school, I'd already written 2 symphonies and had one of them performed at my local Lawrence University in Appleton, Wisconsin. I know that you went to Marquette.
I did.
But when I graduated from high school, a group called Matrix was just graduating from Lawrence that ended up being the Newport Jazz's Band of the Year in about '78 or something. And actually, my latest album that just came out this last month was actually mixed by Larry Darling, who was one of the leaders of Matrix Band 25 years ago. So everything is still being connected. All of the connections I've had, I still use. But what happened was, I ended up loving theater. When we were young in the '60s, theater was an avenue for social change. And I always wanted to be a playwright, even though I loved music. And musicals were something that didn't really connect. It wasn't like, but then musicals began to especially with Sondheim, started to change what you could talk about in music. And so by the time I got old enough to be a part of this in the '80s, I decided to start to write a kind of musical drama with incorporated social changes. I would use stories like Robin Hood, which was one of my first shows off Broadway, to show the collateral damage that happens with revolution and violence. And so even though it's a swashbuckling, fun Robin Hood story, the main character in it is a young woman who wants to export the freedom of Sherwood Forest to the world, and the death that causes along with the freedom. And so it was really kind of a Vietnam War critique couched as a Robin Hood story. And then I did the same thing with Frankenstein, where I made the creature be the hero of the story, and someone who it was actually, even though I wrote it 25 years ago, it had to do. It would be much better done now, in that each body part was a spirit, and the chorus is made of body parts, and they can all sing and talk at once. And it was his finding himself in this cacophony of voices, which is almost like what you have to do. Mark Lee as a journalist, in this incredible time when you get yelled at from every direction. And you don't know what's true and what's not, and whose agenda is the one that's driving everything. So that's the story of the creature, is to find himself in the midst of all these noises, as well as with someone who created him, who has disavowed him completely. And so he also has to find his own integrity and strength.
Yeah, great stories, and definitely I know that you were involved in musical theater and things of that nature. But if you could, I'd love to hear also about your grandfather, who was involved in silent films, because I know that you was definitely involved in silent films. So I was wondering if he had played any part in your own musical development, because I've always been a fan of silent film and definitely a fan of its early history. So I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what influence he might have had on you as well.
I think there are two. One is that there is an image in my mind of something that's occurring on stage or on film whenever I write anything. Even though I don't necessarily have to associate with it, I love the storytelling aspect of music. And he was a violinist. He loved that voice that would come through, and then the harmonies that were behind it. And silent films left, and he ended up being the janitor
Wow.
of the opera house. And then that didn't pay enough, and so he ended up selling milk during the Depression, and he didn't have the heart to tell people, you have to pay me, and would keep giving the milk, and was fired, and then had to work for his uncle to make furniture, and he took his own piano and made it into a table to sell it. I mean, so his life was full of what my mother would have called failures, and I was brought up as the one person who could try to make his failures into something else. And so even though all of my family were musicians, they all went on to do something else. And my mother really wanted me to become a musician, to use music so that I could redeem her father's life. I never considered him a failure at all. I just considered him a man of integrity that was born at the wrong times.
Oh yeah, understood that. And one of the things that I also know that just from doing research on you and everything was that you were involved in was, and I love you to talk about this because I think folks have tried to do this before. Was you were part of like trying to create a platform that was helping the musicians show some of their passions and things of that nature. So if you can talk a little bit about that platform that you created and where it went and why we don't have it. Because like I said, when I read it, I was like, we need that now.
Yeah. So the internet in the 90s, the internet was invented, and we all thought in the beginning that it would be this place where everything was free, that advertising didn't exist, and that not just the free expression, but the free sharing of bits of information. And so I started a website called Arts Forge to forge the arts together, because I had poetry friends whose agent wouldn't let them write music, and my musician agents who didn't want me to write short stories and poetry, or to only write one genre of music, and then musicians that wanted to paint. And so I was actually one of the first people to start using Finale
Okay.
at the end of '80s. And so my studio that I built was a beta tester. And so I then realized the importance of beta testing. And so when they first came out with painting programs and then 3D painting programs, I became involved in those as well. And one of my good friends who actually backed me financially wanted to buy a company to make ebooks, so I could put music to the ebooks. And then I started writing science fiction games so that I could put all this stuff together, because I could write the music and the story and help with the art. And so I became semi-proficient in the art and the coding and the music and all that stuff. And ArtSforge was born to try to create this. And our first ebook involved I would say a 15-year-old boy who finds himself stumbling into the fifth dimension that is made up of course, gorgeous women and beautiful landscapes. And the guy who was doing the women ended up selling our major character as the first CGI model in Brazil. And the whole story fell through because we lost the rights to 2/3 of the story because we couldn't use the bones and the skin that he had created CGI wise. And I would say it took a matter of months for everyone else to say, oh, but we worked so hard. But it was at a time when nobody cared about being paid. They cared about the end product, to try to create something through the internet that crossed genres and combined everything.
Wow, definitely a
This
fascinating history.
is before Google, you
Oh,
know.
wow.
So then all of a sudden, I would say by 2000, and in 2005 I was very involved in Mac Jams. I was the single moderator. It was the major Apple product songwriting website, and we wanted to be able to license people so that they could sell, and that whole thing ended up hitting this terrible wall. And that's right about when Facebook came in and MySpace started to fall apart. And all of a sudden everybody Facebook owns everything that you put up. Anything you put up on Facebook, they actually own it. and and that model ended up destroying our model, where you owned your own stuff. And it was just and now we have a commercial enterprise internet, and
Right.
it's not at all what we imagined in 1995.
Got you. Well, one of the other things I'm sure you didn't imagine and everything, and I would love for you to share with our audience about that story as well. And I know we talked about it in our pre-interview, was a little bit about what you went through. And next year we'll be celebrating the 20th anniversary of 9/11. But y'all were doing a lot of stuff, even with the artistic community at that time in New York, to try to help folks. And when you told me about even the ways that we were being unified at that time, and we're seeing like not that kind of unity, unfortunately, now in some situations, it just struck me as a stark contrast to what's going on now. So I'd love if you could talk a little bit about what y'all did during that time in New York and how it's even impacted your life now, because it's even impacted a little bit of your own personal health. But if you could share a little bit about what y'all were doing at that time, I'm sure our audience would love to hear about that.
Yeah, thanks. I was living in downtown New York, and it was at a time when I would work until 2 in the morning, get home at 4, and sleep until like 10 or something. And actually, when the first plane hit just before 9 o'clock, it woke me up. And I looked down, and in between my feet from my bed, I could see the Twin Towers ablaze. It was so much worse. There's so much more flame. I imagine that 30,000 people are going to die, as opposed to 3. That it was kind of a miracle that we escaped with a small amount of loss of life compared to what could have been. But I lived close to the Twin Towers. The day that the following day, I was going to try to help, and went to Chelsea Piers, which, if you've been to New York, is along the West Side Highway on the Hudson, and that was going to be turned into. There was an ice rink there that was going to be turned into the morgue, but there were no bodies, and so there was no morgue, and there was no need for volunteers. And I walked back to my apartment feeling totally dejected, and I saw a pile of stuff on 17th and West, which was as far as you could get with the blocks that they were setting up, as far as a regular person could get back into the southern tip. And people had left socks and boots and stuff. And so I thought, well, what are these? Who is going to do anything with this? And so I decided to hang around for a couple hours. In a couple hours, we had mounds of things, and there was a little bridge right there, and the New York Water Patrol, the people who were in the boats, called up and asked me if I had something for them. That they needed socks, they needed boots, they needed pails. And so what started as like a couple hours of me hanging around trying to, what can I do with all the stuff that people are just putting on the sidewalk? You go 2 days later, and I had helped take over the entire complex of Chelsea Piers. And we created what was called the Home Depot by the people who were working right there at Ground Zero. And we had a huge system set up. I had 250 people under me by the time, but in 3 days' time. And we were the main suppliers at the time of everybody who was volunteering, all the firemen and everybody who was working at ground zero. It was all coming through the back end using the water patrol of the New York City Police and all the volunteers at Chelsea Piers. And we were giving them illegally antibiotics and cigarettes and beer and the things that they needed, that the Red Cross was only giving them water, and we were supplying them with food. I knew people who on Broadway actresses came down, and we actually had Spirit boat lines in the back park, and they would perform, and then Spirit lines were giving them hot food as opposed to sandwiches, and we worked with McDonald's and the other places that they're working around the clock to provide food for free to these guys. When we first, I remember telling you, when we first went back there to see what was happening after the first day, let's see, where is it? It was, there was 8-10 inches of dust, and the guys couldn't sit. And when I said, well, why don't you get some of the stuff from Marriott Hotel or something? They said, if the doors are locked. And I said, well, break the windows. You guys need to sit after working for 8 or 10 hours and being exhausted, and they're standing in the back. And so a bunch of us who were firemen and didn't have any laws to keep us from doing this broke the windows. And so we broke the windows, and we created a whole area in the back where we brought them food and all the different things, and pickaxes. They would go through boots in 20 minutes. The I-beams and stuff are so hot that the boots would just burn off in some of the areas of ground zero in the back. So the amount of stuff that they needed was immense. And so we started supplying them every 20 minutes because we filled up a place the size of 3 or 4 basketball courts of stuff and organized the whole thing. It was so moving. People would come walking from ground zero up into Chelsea Piers, and they would just weep. They would look at what we were doing, and I would come up to them and say, "What do you need?" And they would just cry because they had no idea, because the Red Cross wasn't giving them anything they needed. And 2 weeks later, FEMA showed up and shut us down because they were afraid that we could be a terrorist threat. None of the 250 people who were working for me were vetted. It was crazy. But during those 2-3 weeks, it was like heaven on earth. It was the beauty of humanity. We walked around with holes in our chest and our brains squealing constantly. We couldn't sleep. We just had to keep working. But there was beauty all around us. So when I think of 9/11, I don't think of the towers coming down, even though I was actually taking a picture of the flames when the tower came down. So I actually have pictures of the falling tower. Indescribable. So that pain was always with you, but to see every human being turned into an angel, it was the most beautiful time of my life.
Wow.
The 3 weeks.
Sounds like it definitely touched you in a lot of different ways and everything of that nature. Now, one of the other things I've noticed from you about reading your bio and everything else is that you definitely believe in environmentalism and also believe in the power of music to be a tool in activism. So I would wonder if you could share with the listeners and everything a little bit about your passion for environmentalism and what's going on in the world, and also your passion for connecting music and activism together.
That requires a sip.
No problem.
Also, after 9/11, the 10-year, this is going to be the 20-year anniversary coming up. I was part of a 4-hour 10-year anniversary television special. I was the only person who wasn't wearing an outfit. The person who was the head of the fire department, who was head of security at Twin Towers, all these people are sitting around there, and I was this last guy who was, wearing a turtleneck with long hair, and nobody knew who I was. And when I told my story and that I was the guy who started what ended up being the Home Depot, everybody got up and they teared and thanked me. It was so cool. And before we go on, it's you feel like America is someplace special. Why is America someplace special? Because we feel like we have the freedom to answer the problems with our own action. And we have to be able to have the freedom and the power, the backing to answer, because there's almost no problem that we can't fix if we know we're all together and we can do it this way. And that's what happened. And that's what FEMA destroyed when they came in, and that's what FEMA destroyed in Hurricane Katrina's response. And hopefully FEMA's better now and will get better, but there's nothing like the power of millions of people who just gave and gave and gave and came up with answer after answer of the things that were required in 2001. But when it comes to the environment, I have always attacked the environment from a bit of a different angle, and my initial involvement was through the United Nations, through the youth movement, so that we could teach the youth. And in the UN, youth is age 25 and under. It's not age 17 and under. And so we worked with youth groups throughout the world. And a lot of the stuff that happened, this was mainly starting in the middle 80s. So the amount of, if you think of 85 to 92, the concept of what happened in almost every classroom in America actually happened throughout the world, where kids started to demanding, we have to recycle. Why do we need all this packaging? All that stuff started happening. And my point was to give the children a voice so that they could speak to the future, and they could try to tell the adults, we need this to happen. And so the shows that I would write and the songs that I would write all had to do with that. And it was trying to give power and voice to youth, because they're the ones that have to live in this environment. I actually met Al Gore at the United Nations when we first performed, and I thought, this guy's not the answer. And when he became vice president, within 2 years, almost all of the money was pulled from what was happening at the United Nations. And so it's my view of effective action and what should happen has to do with what we fund and how we teach and what we do. It doesn't have to do with headlines, because an awful lot, people thought Al Gore is the vice president. Now I don't have to give money. Now I don't have to work. Now I don't have to do this. And everything just stopped. So when you actually look at the trajectory of the environmental movement, 94 is the end, because it started to die in 92 with their election. And so what can we do to get back there? And that's really just starting again. There's been 20 years of when it comes to what the United Nations could do. Though I'm really proud of a lot of companies, and especially in this country, what we've been doing. When you look at emissions, when you look at stuff, this country is leading the world. I'm very proud of that.
Yeah, we're doing a great job of definitely doing more in the environmental area. And I know a lot of people are more concerned about the environment for sure. I'm not sure that our current folks are doing as much as they could be doing in terms of some of our present leaders and things of that nature. But that's just my own personal opinion, that I think that they could be doing a lot more in the realm of environmental actions and environmental activism and things of that nature. So I'd like to see them doing more of that. Could you also talk, Tobin, a little bit about the importance of arts and activism connecting? Because I definitely think that they do a great job of connecting. I think that they have historically, even if you look back at like Woodstock, and if you look back at like even way back to like the 50s, and I would even argue back in the Great Depression, there were artists that were also activists as well, and even back further back than that, even like in the slavery days and things of that nature. But it's always seemed to be a very much of a connection between art and activism. But I was wondering your thoughts on that.
Right. Well, I would pick Woody Guthrie
Yeah.
as one of the greats. Yes, and you know, when there's nothing like singing together to feel like you're one, and to be able to have music pull you together. It doesn't just give you energy. You know, there's a spiritual element that feeds the inside of you. That's because that's really what you need. Even when you're exhausted, you can and also I love, you know, the idea of music and lyrics, which is often in general and not specific, so that the answers aren't necessarily there, but the goal is there. And that's, I think, one of the things that we forget now, is that you can have two different answers to the same goal. We can't forget we actually have the same goal of a clean environment. That's the part we can't. We have a goal of justice for all people, of equality, of openness in the economic realm. All those things that we have almost everybody I know has that same goal. So if we can just always remember, well, we may disagree about this. Remember, we have the same goal. So let's figure out what's good about yours and what's good about my idea, and work it all together. And I think that music is this spiritual bridge that can keep the goal in mind as we move forward, and keep our souls energized.
Yeah, I would definitely agree with you on that and everything. One of the other things that you've had the pleasure of doing, and I know it's probably got to really be tearing at you the way that we're going now, is that you actually had the pleasure of working on Broadway. And because I mentioned earlier, they're talking Broadway may not reopen in its full-fledged version until May or June or something like that. So if you could talk a little bit about your background in terms of your work on Broadway and your work in musical theater, because I know that that's a lot of what you've done and everything, because I'd love for folks to learn a lot more about your history in that realm, but also if you could talk about what Broadway means to you, and your thoughts on Broadway now, as we're facing what we're going through with the pandemic, and it has definitely impacted a lot of industries, including Broadway. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on where we are with Broadway, and also your thoughts about Broadway in the past and your own involvement with it.
Yeah. Well, I've been involved, I guess, for 30 years. And so when you go back to the beginning of the 90s, and an off-Broadway show could cost $60,000, $70,000. By the middle 90s, 95, 96, one of my shows would cost $360,000. By the time 2000 happened, an off-Broadway show would cost $1 million. So the arc of Broadway and big money has really changed it. I love that the 90s brought New York and cleaned it up so that it was a safer place. I am very ambivalent of the Disneyfication of Broadway, and how it became a place for the Lion King and Disney shows, as opposed to a place of socially conscious and adult intellectual theater, and I hope that see, I, as part of why I love off Broadway is that off Broadway is still that way. It still has a lot more freedom of what you can do. There's nothing like live theater. When you're on stage, anything wrong that happens becomes the exact perfect right thing that is occurring at that moment. And everyone has to rally to the error to make it the right thing. And nothing is ever performed the same way. It's not like seeing a movie. And you have to create the story in an arc. You can't film it out of sequence. And there's such a personal connection there. I really hope that that Broadway and community theaters all across the country can get back to live performance. There's a way of doing things safely, and I worry that our lockdown is creating not just a poverty of job loss and economic dislocation, but a poverty of social connection that is putting people in a bubble. And I really hope that is something that once we come out of this, the bubbles will all go away so that we can connect again. I find that from a social evolution point of view actually worrisome. That after 9/11, the buildings came down. We then fixed it. After the 2009 economic collapse, the banks screwed all of us, and people were thrown out of their houses, and it was awful, and it wasn't really fixed, and we are still struggling with this problem, with some of these problems, and I really hope that socially what's happened is that where we only see this much of each other, and we can't touch, and that there's no live performances. We have to somehow fix that and get back to it. It can't remain a systemic problem. The WHO just yesterday, the day before, said that the lockdowns have to be opened up. That is creating 200 million people will die in the next 12 months worldwide from poverty from the lockdowns. And I see that occurring in my community, where there are people who have working jobs who can work from home, people who have lost their jobs that may never get one back. And we have to figure out how to 9/11 it so that we're all in it together again. And we figure out a way to do that. I have 4 children. One of them is a daughter who's 30 who lives in Minneapolis, who lives in downtown Minneapolis. Her post office was burned down. The place where she used to work before her job now, the entire streets are boarded up because of not from COVID, but because of the aftermath of the riots. And Minneapolis isn't letting these people get the money to rebuild until they pay the taxes due on January 1st, 2021. And they don't have any money because of the COVID shutdown prior to this. It's idiotic policies like this. But there's like an Angie list. I don't know, it's like an Angie list of connection of people that they're creating through the internet that my daughter is involved in, where people are saying, I need this money, and they're sharing. And they're sharing food, and they're sharing ideas, and they're sharing furniture, and that's the kind of thing, this ground up thing that doesn't get in the media, that, because whoever heard of what I did with the Home Depot and Chelsea Piers? It never got in the news. um, who was hearing what's happening in Minneapolis, where they're actually helping each other and fixing things on a grand scale? There's tens of thousands of people involved in this website exchange of loans and money and charity and stuff. It's beautiful. It's and that's what
And
I I
what's the
hope.
name of that website? Because like I said, we can even create a banner right here, and we can let folks know about that right here on the air. So, what's the
Yeah,
name of that website?
no, I would I don't have it. I don't have it. I
Yeah,
can get it to you after this. I can get it to, but there are things like this that are happening in places like Eugene, Portland, and some other places. There's a lot of really cool alternative activity that's out there.
yeah, definitely. There's a lot of activities that we're not seeing or hearing about, and definitely, I'm hoping that you'll pass that on to me so I can pass it on to other folks as well.
Yeah.
We do have King Wojak, who I'm going to bring in as well, so he didn't make it an appearance. So we're going to have him come into the conversation as well. So I'm going to bring him in, but I'm also going to bring on your banner so that folks can learn more about you and everything. But as we're bringing that all on and everything, if you could talk a little bit about some of the famous folks that you worked with, because I was just amazed with some of the amazing folks that you have worked with in your long and illustrious career. So I want to bring on King Wojak, but if you could share some of those folks that you've worked with, I would love to hear that. And I'm sure King Wojak might like to hear that as well. So definitely if you could talk about that and things of that nature.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I've really been blessed to work with some beautiful souls, and one of the greatest pianists of jazz was Dave Brubeck, and he was really in his career, he was only a jazz musician for the first part of his career, and he became disillusioned with the touring and everything, and then started writing sacred music. It was still jazz music, but one of his first albums I performed on. One of his first, it was his Easter cantata album, and so he's one of the greatest personalities, and he's the humblest person in the room. And so, as a young man, I had a whole different view of, I don't know, celebrity, of and a threshold of what I kind of expected out of people, and then someone like Ron Carter, who is a gorgeous soul, and I also played sax with Maynard Ferguson before I became mainly a pianist. And Maynard Ferguson, who I thought, because he kind of took like the Rockies theme, and all, he kind of was a mainstream sellout. He was the hippest person I have ever met. He was absolute jazz through and through. He knew how to put out albums to make money, but as a talent, he was pure hip jazz. A cool cat. This is why they dream there. So those are some of the people.
And some of the amazing folks that you've definitely worked with. And like I said, I knew that you had worked with a lot of those folks and all of that. And definitely, I knew that you were involved in, like we talked about earlier, the environmental movement, and definitely involved with a number of other things as well. King Wojak, who has joined us on the call as well, has also been involved in activism and in a number of ways as well. So definitely part of the things we've been talking about, King Wojak, was about the importance of activism and its connection to the arts. So I'd love for you to talk about your views about the connection of activism and the arts, and then definitely you and Tobin can also carry on that conversation for a while. But I would love to hear your thoughts on the role of activism and the arts. We've also seen the role of activism and sports with what LeBron and others have been doing. But I'd love to hear your thoughts and reflections on what that means.
Right. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Blessings to you guys. I came in through the conversation of, on the part about the theater. I heard millions of dollars and I heard the theater part. And I was like, oh, okay, this is what I needed to be. Thank you, Lord. Because I've been watching a few Netflix documentaries. You know, that's what we have to do out here in Washington State when it's storming and it's raining and it's just nothing to do, no place to go. We Netflix. So, watching Netflix, I found the 40-year-old version, which is a hip hop movie, and it just talked about the arts and about trying to reinvent yourself at 40 years old plus. And it was a great documentary. Not a great, it was a great movie. The music was beautiful throughout the whole movie, and they had some parts elements of activism and gentrification and the struggle of what artists have to go through to break through in theater. And it was talking about Broadway, and it had a piece in there where this girl had to sell out her show to Broadway in order to get a piece of money to pay her rent, and that's all it was about. It was just you hit it on the head. So I don't know where we're talking about with Broadway, but I too want to dabble into the arts of writing plays and seeing plays in my mindset, as far as hip hop and the things I've been through and telling the story and being able to talk about, because not everybody's going to buy your album, but a lot of curious folks, we call them, will pay $40 to $50 to go see your Broadway show and see what your life is all about. And it's, I guess it's their culture. They like to see Broadway. I don't. I'm not a fan of going and watching people do live stuff. But as I heard the brother say, Mr. Tobin, he said that people, actually the show doesn't go as scripted. And I was like, oh, okay, because that's how I know. I know you just can't go every night the same exact thing. You got to freestyle some of this. You got to, you got to have some genuine, moments where things just, God made this happen. You know what I mean? You knew that God put this moment together because it just couldn't have fell in the place so greater. So that's what I believe in, the art of freestyling and being able to, just create things right off the top of your head, being witty, being on point, being there and listening and being ready to dialogue with somebody mentally, chess game. And so that's what I was thinking about doing the arts. And so I would love to tell a story about hip hop, gentrification, gang violence, uh, people trying to make it out of that by trying to do music and being artists, and then getting into that part of the life, and still getting the short end of the stick because there was, the crooked executives in the music industry was horrible in the '90s, and everybody's contract was damn near the same contract, and would just infused a few different words in their name, and it became a shit show for a lot of artists, and we all lost a lot. I sold a lot of records during the '90s, being a young radical criminal nation artist, and I didn't receive anything, none of the benefits. All I received is just the accolades from the community and people across the nation saying, "Hey, we remember you. We bought your album. We seen you on BET. We watched your videos." But I'm an unsung hero type of artist, so you won't hear about me until I either do something crazy or pass, and hopefully somebody says, "Hey, that guy was on point." So today I'm just falling into these great interviews produced by my homegirl Arias, who sends me these emails late in the morning, and I'm like, "Oh man, I'm interview day." So I didn't get dressed for anything. I'm sitting out on the back porch. I just had a bacon and egg sandwich. Got some fresh water here, and it's not raining. The wind, it's a little cold out here, but it's a beautiful day in the
Yeah.
neighborhood.
Appreciate that. Tobin, if you could, and I'd love to hear your thoughts and reflections on what definitely King Wojak just said. But one of the things that I also remember you talked about was the fact that sometimes there is a little bit of freestyling that goes on in musical theater. Because I remember you were telling me a story about somebody that was a drummer that had to actually reinterpret your piece on a regular basis. So if you could talk about the impact of freestyling, because I think that definitely musical theater oftentimes does have an impact of freestyling similar to rap and hip hop. So I'd love to hear you talk about the parallels between that kind of freestyling that goes on. So I'd love to hear you talk about that, Tobin.
Yeah, in one of my shows, there's a song that was called Cliff's Edge, and it's actually on my album that just came out last month. And when I work with drummers, the percussion is something that I'm not proficient at. I can play almost every other instrument, but when it comes to drumming, I know a drummer is going to come up with something better than what I think. And so I give them certain hits, certain sets, but mostly their chart is full of blank spaces. And so I said, okay, this is kind of a straight jazz piece, but I don't want to do it that way. And so I asked him, I said, let's start with a hip hop groove, because I've never actually done anything to a hip hop groove. I've done like funk and stuff, but I haven't done the hip hop groove. And so he started playing it, and it transformed the entire arrangement. And so we start playing the chart, and the first, we play the head, and it sounds really great. And I'm playing stuff that's like Herbie Hancock, and on the organ, and then it gets to the first tenor solo, and it cools out, and then we rev back up, and then the soprano sax solo is supposed to really get hip. But all of a sudden, the whole hip hop thing had taken on a bit of a rock hip hop feel, and the drive of the tune completely changed. So when it got to what was gonna be the climax, I'm just going like this we got to give it 8 more bars, because this isn't fleshed out yet. And so all the players are playing 8 more bars, but nobody knows what the notes are. And so they're all just listening, even though it's a 9-piece band. They're all just listening together, and it created the best moment, I think, on the whole CD.
But we're going to give a chance for our listeners to hear a little bit of Cliff's Edge. I definitely wanted them to hear some of your work, Tobin, and everything. So I'm actually going to bring that up right now, and hopefully they'll get a chance to hear a little bit of what's going on with your music, and definitely, hopefully, enjoy the music as well.
And then it all comes down.
Yeah. What a great song that was and everything. And we back up King Wojak. King Wojak, what did you think? That was some of Tobin's music, so he's giving you applause and all of that. So he was definitely enjoying those sounds for sure and everything. So that's definitely getting some approval from one of the masters of hip hop in terms of representing that West Coast kind of vibe. So definitely just share your thoughts as you were hearing that song and your own connection to it.
I love jazz because I love the expression that each instrumentalist gets to add to the pot. You know, it's just I've been a part of bands before. Man, look, first of all, Mr. Tobin, pleasure to meet you.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
I'm
likewise.
gonna
Yeah.
have to Google you and find out who you are and who I'm talking to, so I can be excited more. Um, but what I am saying is, it's been a pleasure to be in my 30 plus years of being in the music industry, chasing the dream, trying to be, wanting to be, and being at the same time um, an artist. And I had to learn. I had to learn from some of the great bass players out here, the drummers. You know, because I started off as a drummer in high school and in my days of being in church and stuff, going to Sunday school. I had to play the drums once I learned how to play the drums because my parents bought me a drum set. So it was just evident that I would become a drummer. And ever since then, I knew the bass, the drum was the glue to most compositions. When and I've
Yeah.
heard compositions without drumming, but when you want to move the people and groove the people, and when that drum bass hits, when that beat hits, it's undeniable. It's going to hit you in the chest if it's properly sounded. The sound is proper. It's going to hit you in the chest. It's going to move you, and it's going to keep you grooving because we are groovy people. We love to groove. We have to groove. If we're not grooving, something's wrong. If you don't listen to music, and I'm talking about anything, it could be from Boy George playing on the radio. Do you really wanna? You know what I mean? That if you don't know any of the music, you just something's wrong with you. I don't think you have the gene, the bug. I have the gene. I have to groove. I have to wake up to music or listen to music or do something musically every single day to be alive. And it's a blessing. So I want to figure out who I'm talking to, who's on the line with me, and then after we get done, let's chop it up because I do want to talk about the theater and the arts, and my mind is starting to click. We see being out here in Washington and being this being that I am. I've scared a few folks with my revolutionary talk, with my real hip hop, with my gangster rap. And this is Washington State, Tacoma, Washington, Seattle, Washington, and then everywhere outside of us is Caucasianville. And so it's okay, but we're still struggling to try to have a culture here, a black culture. We're still struggling to try to have a music industry here, and it's so many artists, so many artists that are just walking blindly trying to do music, and I am one of them. I'm just a guy who started off earlier before some of these babies came up out of their papa's sacks. I was already on the mic and already on the music scene and rapping and beatboxing and holding down ciphers, and so when I think about the arts and going to do a play, you got to have freestyle, you got to have the beatboxing, you got to have a few rappers that know how to really get down right off the top of the dome to have that authentic element of hip hop. And I feel like if we could just get together and produce something authentic, the world will just be so much. It'll be a blessing. It'll be a breakthrough, and just like Hamilton's a breakthrough. You know what I mean? People loved Hamilton because he incorporated real hip hop. I didn't see the show because I'm still not a fan of that type of stuff. You know what I mean? But I want to put one together because I just want to step outside the box. So I'm gonna have to kick myself in the butt and go watch Hamilton, and then I'm gonna have to come back and recreate a pop themed show that tells the story of what we did out here in Washington State and Tacoma and meeting Sir Mix-a-Lot and going to Skate King and battle rapping and gang violence and NWA and all the things that happened out here. It's a story to be told and rival some of the other great stories too, I'm sure.
Oh yeah, no doubt about that. I would love to hear from Tobin. King Wojak has been on a couple of our other shows before, and you actually talked about it earlier about what's going on with Broadway and how Broadway has, for lack of a better term, been corrupted and things of that nature. But Tobin, you've also been involved in the music world, so I would love to hear your thoughts about how things are going now musically in terms of both radio play and in terms of the industry in general. Because, like I said, you've been in the game for a number of years. You've been in there for decades and things of that nature. So I would love to hear your reflections on what's going on musically and how the music industry is doing in terms of like developing new talent or even old talent like King Wojak and others. So I'd love to hear your reflections on where the music industry is now and where you would like to see it go.
Well, I would like to see it go backwards, so that it get to the point where a DJ can be a DJ and can choose his own music. What happened was college radio became the place because that was the only place where you actually had the freedom. So I don't know when it was, if it was is in the aughts, the beginning of the 2000s when Clear Channel 1 took over the whole frickin' world. And if you didn't get in one of those mixes, like I once I had an album where I got in one of those mixes, the thing went to 16. because it was like playing every day, and then it got off and it went down to like 150 the next day once it wasn't in this mix anymore. It's so that's, and because we live in an internet age, like I wrote a bunch of children's musicals for education purposes in the 80s, and I now have grandkids. And so I said, I should send him with the CDs so my grandkids can hear the stuff I wrote 30 years ago. And all my kids said, I don't own a CD player. So I had to put it all on the internet. But then, and it used to be you sold an album and you made between $3.50 and $5 an album. And now you get, and it also used to be you get 3 pennies for a Spotify play. Now you get 1 penny or a fraction of a penny. So all of that stuff it makes it so difficult. Luckily, I'm at a point in my life where I don't have to make money if I don't live too long. So if I only, I'm only supposed to have like 12 years left. I actually am on year 11 of my 12th year. That the doctor said I had left. So I'm not worried about running out of money, but when that happens to you and you realize, okay, I only have so much time, you actually choose what you write and what you put out there differently, because you want a legacy. You want to say something that lasts a long time. You don't want to say something that hits a hook for the moment, and it frees you up to do it. But I don't see any evolution in the music industry as a positive thing right now for the independent artist. It's CD Baby is taken off their store. Spotify is trying to become a major stock now, as opposed to a vehicle for artists. I don't know. I loved the age when you bought an album and you took it home and you lived with it for 3 weeks and you studied everything that was written in it, and people will still remember when I can still remember I was playing basketball in my driveway when the neighbor ran in and said, "Rubber Soul, this is going to change the world." And we sat and listened to Rubber Soul for the next, I don't know how long. And every single note and everything made a difference. Or when Herbie Hancock's Headhunters first album came out, and or when Sly Stone first came out. And these things blew our minds, and we studied them. Now you get a snippet of one song from your entire album that luckily gets played.
Yeah.
So we actually need some kind of cultural revolution, because I don't see any of the motion working in the right.
Yeah, we definitely need a cultural revolution and everything. And speaking of cultural revolution, and I told you, Toby, that I was going to be bold and play one of your songs that's got some definitely radical views and everything of that nature. But before we get to that one, I'm going to actually play King Mojack's The War Zone, because he definitely also talks about a lot of issues as well. And I feel that it's only fair that since he's here, that we hear a little bit of his music as well. So you're going to bring on The War Zone and let folks check that out as well.
Appreciate it. Enjoy.
Public Enemy music. You were tuned in with General Wojak, broadcasting live from another undisclosed location, giving you the truth like no other at a time. You know what happens to real niggas like me. Yeah. The revolution will not be televised, but it will be broadcasted on pirate radio. Yeah. Listen. Wojak. 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 Hey. Wojak. Wojak, yeah. Listen. Why you driving fancy cars? They rape the earth. Tell the people to go vote, go to church, and then they pray it works. Ask too many questions, they make you look ridiculous, suspicious in the city, right? Heavy and conspicuous, the planet's under attack. The man is a man killer, dealing drugs and guns and prescriptions to your grandchildren. This gone too far like a car with no driver in it. I get rid of it so you can know that I'm a fire with it. Burn like a fire with it. You marshmallows melt with me. This is for being stupid, stingy, and leaving a couple pennies while you claim at the earth is your playground. We walking on eggshells. Watch what you say now. Cops armed to the teeth. Too involved in the streets. Now I understand why these niggas on the corner were clean. It's a game off the TV by the overseer. Big brother watching us clear. Hoping that we fear.
Welcome to the New World Order. You can follow me out of America. We not free. Held by the Nazis in concentration prisons. Back to the limit. This is unfair living. 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 Back to the limit. This is unfair living.
It's a new world order. No need for borders. Everybody's a slave like a chip with a camcorder. Prison rage building. Young kids getting shot by they handcuffed niggas standing by chilling. Cell phones filming the whole incident. This ain't no coincidence. The devil's never innocent. Living with criminals in America's magnificent. You can die tonight and be famous for life. History's written by liars and monsters. I think like a god, so I murder at my conscience. While all you other niggas trying to neutralize my conscience, it won't work. Keep rapping about your nonsense and homework. Yeah, niggas be at home jerking bones out. I be in the field trying to get my zone out. Fucking mass appeal. You're an actress, I leave your ass bleeding on an orthopedic mattress.
Welcome to the New World Order. You can follow me out of America. We not free. Held by the Nazis in concentration prisons. Back to the limit. This is unfair living. Back to the limit. This is unfair living. Back to the limit, this is unfair living. Back to the limit, this is unfair living. Back to the limit, this is unfair living.
What do you know about pain?
The street's my world. I don't pretend to go uptown, eat anything fancy. I can, but I find more real.
I'm in a place where they periodically pick apart the community, and we ain't doing jack to stopping niggas on that buffoonery. Clowning and young people buying bullshit, wearing chains like a fresh slave. Devil's tools, they pulling out on each other in the middle of the afternoon. Guns, drugs, bitches, broke niggas, cause tragic doom. I am past the gloom, attitude Zulu. Got an ethnic Lindsay's, niggas cut like the Hutu. We cut the tall grass down so we can see the water flowing like a river. Then I ask forgiveness from my father. Break the commandments, plot on the planet's behalf. All this talk is talk. When I walk, I stalk like a wild lion, a crocodile after that Tarzan. For 1,000 years, they infiltrated our land. Took us for hostage, made us work for no profit. Now we integrated in a motherfucking mosh pit.
Welcome to the New World Order. You can follow me out of America. We not free. Held by the Nazis in concentration prisons. Back to the limit. This is unfair living. Back to the limit. This is unfair living. Back to the limit. This is unfair living. Back to the limit, this is unfair living. Back to the limit, this is unfair living.
Pues con el orden de paz, pues, hombres en lucha. El brillo forzado, en the light, I pass yours, defensa de armas, in hell.
Sticks and stone.
You got it now?
Us all back to the limit, this is unfair living. Back to the limit, this is unfair living. Back to the limit, this is unfair living. Black and white man locked down in a prison. Back to the limit, this is unfair living. Back to the limit, this is unfair living. Back to the limit, this is unfair living. All the Mexicans locked down in the prison. Back to the limit, this is unfair living. Back to the limit, this is unfair living. Back to the limit, this is unfair living. In every family, I love wide prison. Back to the limit, this is unfair living. Back to the limit, this is unfair living. Back to the limit, this is unfair living. Everybody in America's living in a prison. Yeah, prison, 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 living in a prison, 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 America the prison, 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 knowledge is risen. Yeah. General Wojak broadcasting live from another undisclosed location, giving you the truth like no other. Yeah. Open your eyes. Stand together. Form your fists. Become one. And we will be God. And he will help us. And we will see the light. And we will do right. Defeat the night. Yeah. 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 Whoa, yeah.
Well, that was King Bojo.
Thank you for playing it. I always just cringe when you play the whole thing because I just be like, that's enough. Give them that a little bit and get on out and let's get back to our beautiful conversation. So, but anyway, thank you very much. That was New World Order by King Wojak, a song I produced in 2013, and I just felt that it was appropriate for these times to talk about prison situation and the prison industrial complex and how they're just locking people up and doing away with all laws and just throwing people, in jail for life. So.
Well, actually, I think that Tobin can relate to that because he's actually done some songs that were revolving around environmental movements and other things that would definitely be considered activist songs as well. Because I know that one of your songs, if I remember correctly, Tobin actually won an honor from the UN for its role with environmentalism. So could you talk a little bit about that award that you got from the UN and that particular song?
It was actually for a whole musical. I wrote a song for a group for a children's youth organization group that the UN then took to be, I think, the 1994 World Environmental Day anthem, and so they asked my theater troupe to come and perform the children's aspect of the theater troupe to come and perform in Washington D.C. And so we performed, and actually then when I got the award, it was really for empowering the voice of youth, and then distributing this musical around. It was performed on 6 continents, so it was performed by a bunch of people, and it was Attenborough, actually, Sir Attenborough gave me the award in London with whoever was the prime minister at the time. I could have cared less who was the prime minister at the time. It was great just to meet, Sir Attenborough. So that was really cool. And then we had like 4 kids who we toured around England doing a distilled version of it. So that was pretty cool.
Definitely. I would love to hear from both of you your reflections on, and you've talked a little bit, Tobin, but I'd love to also hear from King Wojak as to where we are as a country right now in terms of unity, in terms of like fighting the pandemic, and just where you think we are and where we should be. So I'll start with you, Tobin. Where do you think we are in terms of fighting the pandemic, and also in terms of like the unity question around people and things of that nature? And then I'll turn it over to King Wojak. But I'd love to hear your reflection first, Tobin.
As an individual who is in the at-risk category because my lungs are already partially destroyed, I live in Connecticut, and we take it seriously, and I truly appreciate every time I go out the respect that people have and the care that my wife, who worked every day on the front lines, and so they changed her job because they knew she had to come home with me so that she didn't have to meet the public, and everybody just worked really hard and worked together to do that. So I really appreciate that on a local level. I realize that every place in the country is different, and living in Alaska and Hawaii is not going to be the same as living 30 minutes outside of New York City like we do. So that's different. But 77%, 74% of the deaths in Connecticut were old folks in old folks' homes. And we were way too late in worrying about that. And that was so sad to me. And that when we isolate people,
I gotta go get. I gotta go.
we stop talking. So I really dislike isolation that was associated. And I think it's really harmful, especially for old people, especially for little kids. I still think we haven't gotten over the hump where the beautiful world aspect of coming together and trying to defeat this. That I wish that we would find that beautiful world. I think a lot of people in Connecticut have, but I wish that beautiful world concept. This is a tragedy, but it's also an opportunity to realize the vulnerable and how they need help, and to expose it's an opportunity to expose what doesn't work because of the stress, and let's fix what doesn't work that the stress of this pandemic has made plain, and that hasn't happened yet.
Yep, I agree. King Wojak, what are your thoughts on where we are with the pandemic and things of that nature? You heard a little bit of Tobin's reflections. I'd love to hear your reflections as well.
Okay, so I don't know how much time I have. I have to switch between Bluetooth. You know, I'm trying to get this together, brother, Mark. Tobin, I wanted to ask before I get into my view of this pandemic, scamdemic, or whatever we want to call it. What I heard that you said you had a few years left or a year left. Is this a serious illness that where you're not going to be on this earth again, and this is my last time meeting you, first time meeting you, and last, or hopefully not? But whatever's going on with you, I just is it COVID related, or is it just cancer, or is it just?
It's a lung disorder called A1AD that was exacerbated by what happened in 9/11, and I and 12 years ago, my doctor gave me 8 to 12 years. So I am better in certain aspects than I was 3 years ago. I got worse and worse and worse, and now I'm actually getting better because they're coming up with drugs and stuff that they never had before, and so I think I can make it till my mid 70s. I'm 64, even though I look like I'm 72. I tell you, 8 years ago I looked like I was 40, and now I look like I'm 72. So, but I hope I have 10 more years. So that's what I hope.
Okay. Well, like I say, man, no weapon formed against you shall prosper. Black seed oil is the truth. Dr. CB has cures for all types of things. Make sure you look him up and get some natural earths inside your body to continue on your living here and your experience on this earth. Back to the COVID scamdemic. Peace be unto you, my brother. Hope that we can talk after this or email. You can just direct me and give me some guidance in my creativity out here in Tacoma, Washington. Maybe I can spark something. Maybe I can do a remix to one of your children's stories, a hip hop style, because I always want to do some children's stuff too, hip hop
Cool.
related, because I think the kids are just always dreading the hip hop and there's nothing you can do about it. It's here forever. The beat's always going to bang and kids are just going to be in tune and it's going to drive the world to, grow even further. So I'd love to do that. But this right here, I've been in Washington State, and we are the first place to have the the uh, the COVID-19. We are the first place to have it. I watch it on the news because I'm an avid news watcher. That's all we do is watch CNN. Then we watch Fox to see what they're talking about and balance to find out what's going on because whatever they're trying to sell us is on the news. And they've been selling us a whole bunch of BS for a long time. And I know this. And so watching the documentaries that I watch and then going back to live television and watching the news and seeing every channel trying to sell us the same thing, the same numbers, the same this, but they really can't show proof that this thing is. I've I don't want. I'm not a doctor, and I don't want to sound like I'm a, I don't get it or nothing. I do get it. I know that it's germ warfare going on between Russia, China, United States, Iran, and this thing is part of it. So, but we've been here, and I've been out at the casinos, and I've been everywhere, and I've been wearing my mask and not wearing my mask, and wearing my mask, not wearing my mask, and I'm diabetic type 2, and I'm in fear. I'm in deathly fear of catching this thing, and but I don't see it. There's bums living under the bridge right now, just living great and doing good and still hustling and bustling. I just don't see the death of COVID, and maybe that I need to see. Maybe I need to visit some places, but I can't because we can't go there. So I don't know, but I know that the worst thing that's going on, but more than COVID, is that racism is the sheets have come off, okay, and the racists are out, and there's nowhere where are they gonna go after this pandemic or after the presidents are elected? They're here. We know they're here, and they've been a problem just as worse as COVID. Okay, so and I live in the epicenter of white supremacy a lot out here in the Northwest, so I live in fear, but I no weapon formed against me shall prosper. And I walk the earth, with God, knowing that He's gonna no weapon, no man. I fear no man. I do what I want. I live how I want. I feel good, and I don't want to subscribe to the fear of COVID and racism, even though I know it is out there, right outside the street. When I jump in my car and roll up the street, I got to worry about Puyallup, Ording, Roy, anywhere outside of here. These Klan, George Bush flag drive. They put the flags on their big expensive trucks and drive up the street and let us know who they are and where they stand in this racism thing. So I pray for them because it's all education, and a lot of us need to be re-educated on how to live, who did what, why we want what we want, why we want our reparations, why we deserve our reparations, why we deserve to be repaid for the things that our ancestors built in this country, and these folks just have to come to terms with their crimes. That's it, and that's why they'll never do that. They don't want to do that, and so I feel I'm confused. I don't know what to do. I don't know where to go, but I just pray for God to show us a sign because that's one thing that's not involved in these politics is God, and I believe
Yeah,
when man comes together, when me and Mark Lee and Tobin and King Wojak comes together and agree on some things, that's God's blessings. That's God saying these things are anointed. This is how I work. God works through man. Okay, He's not just gonna show up out the sky and be like, "Hey, I'm God. Here's some blessings." God works through me, Mark, and Tobin getting together and building something greater that helps and affects humanity. And so that's why being apart from people and not being together and no gatherings and no church and none of that, this fear of COVID is a scam to me. And I know what they're doing. They don't want the people to get together and pray against their wickedness because their wickedness in high places doing weird things. And I just watched the Filthy Rich documentary about Jeffrey Epstein, and it just let me know, the deep thinker that I am, that they had to get rid of him because he knew too much, and too much was going to be open. And these folks are still in operation today, snatching kids up from different countries and doing as they wish to children of young age. And it's sickening. And that's the truth about this
yeah.
world in America that we live in America. That's the
And
absolute truth. It's sickening. It's sick. And I'll stand by that any day. And that's why I know when we put together this play, woo, praise God. Hallelujah.
I know that's right.
Uh,
Chobin, what are some of your thoughts on where we are in race relations and things of that nature? I know that some of your plays have actually touched on unity and universalism and things of that nature. So I'd love to hear some of your reflections about where we are in the world in terms of being one world or one people, or definitely understanding our cultural diversities as well. So I'd love to hear some of your reflections.
Well, directly when it comes to COVID and the lockdown, what I worry is that the vast majority of people depend on small business entrepreneurial activity, and the lockdowns have been the largest destruction of small business and the largest federal movement of money to big business in the history of the world, definitely in the history of the country. And that's we're just starting to see the destruction that wealth transfer has happened. I have heard that 20 some percent of businesses are gone forever, but 50% of Black businesses are gone forever because of what's happened in the loss of jobs in inner cities, especially. And that's something that we have to heal, and that has to be the number one thing. It's very difficult, I believe, to change a person's mind. I think that we have to have certain behaviors be, you don't behave this way. I don't think you can tell somebody, don't think this way. I think that's counterproductive. It doesn't work. And so I think that we have to, I think commerce is really huge. You know, when the biggest audience for hip hop and rap are, you know, young white kids, well, the same has to do with clothing and food and everything else. That the whole idea of culture appropriation being a bad thing is stupid, because we should be appropriating everything so that we're all intermingling all the time. And I should be proud when someone steals one of my licks, and the person who is doing that, and I'm trying to emulate because I love what they did. They should be proud of that. And you know, we stand on the shoulders of giants. We have to pick the right giants. That's for sure. So we pick the right giants. We stand on the shoulders, but we don't cut off our legs. We gotta grow. We can't burn and start over. There's an awful lot of great stuff that this country in particular, but Western civilization has happened. You know, and this country invented jazz and invented cinema and invented these things. And I don't believe in the idea of purification. I believe the idea of growth. And I think that it's really a huge difference.
Yeah, I can definitely understand that. Like I said earlier on the show, I made the mistake. King Jack, you didn't hear that part because you weren't on earlier, but I made the mistake of actually catching a little bit of the Supreme Court justice nomination hearings and things of that nature. Don't know why I turned that on, because it was becoming a circus. And if I'm honest about it, it was probably a circus on both sides, because one side was parading a bunch of pictures in support of the Affordable Care Act, and the other side was provoking and promoting a lot of religious kind of imagery and things of that nature because of the nominee being Catholic and things of that nature. So last time I checked, there was supposed to be separation of church and state.
Not being Catholic, Mark.
Hearing that going on.
Mark. Not being Catholic, Mark. Being in a weird cult. Being in a crew of weird people that have certain views. Now, Mark and Mr. Tobin, when you watch people on TV, and I'm a fan of watching people because just in my 50 years, and like I say, my 50 years have not been spent doing ignorant stuff. It's been learning and seeking and searching and trying and out here actually in the community meeting people and and then going back and looking up the research of, because the internet has been the greatest thing to debunk a lot of crap that's going on in the world today. You got to go to the internet because the truth is going to be there. You just have to learn how to decipher everything that's coming out and not take everything too literally, and let your spirit see that what's real. But I just don't know about this whole thing, man. This Amy Coney Barrett thing. I looked at people. I looked at the interviews. I looked at the people that were being interviewed. The wives were very, stern faced, didn't talk, didn't look in the camera. It just looked like a weird position for them to be in. Like maybe the wives don't have some type of power. If you're in a cult, man, the wives ain't gonna be up here yapping a whole bunch of crap. Somebody runs the cult, and it's an order. It's a pecking order, and things follow in line. So is Amy Coney Barrett the true speaker in her household, or does she come home and her husband runs the house and tells her what to do and shut up and blah blah blah, and then and then amongst his peers, are they going to mess with her thinking, her appliance to the law? So we don't know what's going on. That's why they're trying to say that she's a Catholic and all this religion crap. They're trying to sell you some BS. And no weapon formed against us shall prosper, but whatsoever we do will prosper in the name of the Lord. Mark Womack.
Yeah, it makes sense. What do you have to think about?
I just came up with an acronym for King because, they want to know why, people will be like, well, why does he call himself king? I don't have no crowns. I don't, I'm not rich at all. Let me just be clear about that. I'm not rich at all. Okay. I'm struggling in this COVID and I'm tired of it. But I still remain that I live a king life. I command king activities. I want to eat king dinners. I want to, have royalty around me. I want, and I want to be the cool king, not the, the king like off with your head unless you deserve it. But king means killing ignorance, knowing God. I just came up with it because I was like, why? What is it? Killing ignorance, knowing God. That's freestyle, Mr. Tobin, right there. I said, because I know Mr. Tobin is like, why is he calling himself king? He had to be like, well, who is he king? I don't know if you ask these questions, but I'm going to answer them for you. Killing ignorance, knowing God. Praise the Lord.
I like that. That's a good
what
one.
I made up today. I'm going to stand by it.
Excellent.
Killing ignorance, knowing God. King Wojo.
Tobin
I
likes
love
that.
it, man. I don't know, man, but I woke up. I feel good.
Yeah, Tobin was enjoying that. He liked that acronym. I wrote that acronym as well. So definitely going to agree with folks on that. So he's agreeing with that. So he's definitely liking the acronym as well. So definitely, have you been watching any of what's been going on the political side, Tobin? And what are your own reflections on what's going on and the need to vote and things of that nature? I'd love to hear you talk about whether you've been watching the Supreme Court process and what you think about the need for us to get out and vote, because I know we've been pushing that a lot here on this network.
That was to me?
Yes, to you, Tobin.
Yeah. It is astounding that there's like 100 million people that don't vote. I just do not get that. I have voted every election that I can recall. I wish we had a system where there were 5 parties and not 2. We need a lot more voices. I think when you were talking about religion and politics, religion is just a puppet crutch that helps people virtue signal, and it rarely means anything. We have to vote, but we have to spend more time, I think, caring about who runs on in the primaries. I think that what choices do we have, these 2 guys? How did that happen? I mean, how did we have a senile guy and a guy who insults somebody like he's in 8th grade? It's the process of us picking people has to be better, and I think that we should have 5 choices. that they're Bernie should have run by himself. He should make his own party. The Libertarians should have a larger piece of the Republican pie. The Green Party, the Democrats are taking the Green Party off of every state that they can because they're afraid of too much democracy being siphoned away. Republicans and Democrats are part of one giant conspiracy of elite wealth that has gained more power than the Russians ever had, of the Russian Communist Party ever had, when it comes to determining narratives and who gets to speak and the definition of terms. It's kind of terrifying, and that's King Wojak spoke about the power of the internet. It's a very precarious power, because the power that I saw on the internet in '98 and the equal and open communication doesn't exist today. It's a completely different curated system, and it's a curve that's going the wrong way. So yes, you have to go out and vote, but don't be afraid to vote for third parties and try to build up stuff. And actually, people go and vote and they kind of know the president, they kind of know the senators. They don't really know their representatives. They don't know their state representatives at all. And nobody knows anybody who's running for local office. And that's like vital. And so the press should be telling us a ton about and care about all these people who are working, because whether our kids go back to school and whether our teachers get PPE and all this, that's actually all local. And I have no idea what anybody thinks on the local level. So
hey, Mr. Tobin, you just made an idea thing off over my head. It's because well, I've messed up with the law, so I have to restore my voting rights as we speak. But like I said, I'm 50, so I'm looking at it as a 50-year-old black man in America, and because the money has become the issue in voting, the money has taken over. Whoever is the richest candidate, whoever has the most backing, whoever outside influence has the most money to pay for that candidate to become the president. That's why people are just so turned off of voting, because they know it's corrupt money running both parties, and they know both parties are still in cahoots with running America and acting like they're fighting. It's like watching your parents fight. I said this before, Mark. It's like watching your parents fight in the house, and you don't know what's going to happen. But at the end of the day, we're moving out of this house because mom's leaving or dad's leaving, but something's going on. The police coming, the dad's going to jail. It's going to be a hectic problem with this house. And that's what I feel like is going on in the White House. Two adults are fighting over America and who black votes. We're for the black people. There's no black representatives. There's nothing up in there that says that we should be voting for you. And you made a real good point that I think during this voting thing is we have to vote for the state and all the stuff up underneath the president. And they got us confused by just the president. And so people are turned off by voting for the president. But we forgot we got to go vote for these people that are getting voted in the Senate, the state, the city, legislation, all that stuff. And that's what's making the city corrupt and bad too, as well as the top president. That was huge right there for me, at least, because I didn't know. I just thought it was going about voting for the president and then getting out of there and leaving. But no, you got to vote for a whole list of stuff on that thing, and I forgot about that. Totally.
Yeah, those local
Forgot all about it. We got to push that agenda on the community.
Yeah, there's places, where the judges and sheriffs are up for re-election. That those are actually focused on positions, and that's vital. And they get
right about that. You're right. Those elections are very things of that nature. I know we're getting ready to wind down, but before we wind down, and I wanted everybody, because we usually do this at the end of the show and everything, but before we wind down, I do want to give folks a taste of that song that I was talking about, because like I said, I was going to put it on there and everything. So I want folks to check out a little bit, which is actually similar to what King Bojack was talking about. So we are going to give them at least a dose of Speak Truth to Power. So definitely we're about to play a little bit of that as well. And then, like I said, at the end, I always ask people if they can give a thought of positivity or a thought of encouragement to our listening audience. So definitely be thinking about that as we listen to Speak Truth to Power by none other than Tobin Mueller.
Let's do it.
Okay, so there's two things I want to mention. One was that, in 1948, you forget how advanced jazz had become. There were tons of people that had Dizzy Gillespie for president. I mean, he was just about the biggest celebrity in the country. You know, at least you know in my house. So he was like a, and people don't even know who he was anymore, hardly. It's just yeah. And then just like I had mentioned to Mark before, that the last voices that still speak truth are the comedians, and that's why the last people on there were the comedians.
And it was such a powerful image. Like I said, there were so many famous things and so many issues that are even relevant today. I saw that you definitely honored the folks that are part of the African American liberation movement, part of the women's movement, a number of other things that are going on, even like the LGBT community. There were a number of things that I saw that you were honoring with the images that you were having in that particular video and things of that nature. And one thing we didn't get to this time, but I'm definitely hoping to get you back on at another future show and everything, Tobin, is the fact that not only are you a great composer, a great musician, but you are also an artist in your own right as well. So I did notice that you are also an artist in addition to being a musician. So if you want to talk just real briefly a little bit about that, I'm sure folks would love to know about your artwork as well.
Well, that's okay. We can talk about that. But I did want to say, like my youngest daughter, who lives in Minneapolis, who before you know is a sex therapist who actually works in the LGBT community. One of my sons is a lawyer in LA, and who you know works at food banks and stuff. Another son is a doctorate in RNA research, and his wife is a virologist at Stanford, and they're working really, really hard on the whole COVID thing and how to create new kind of vaccines and stuff. So I feel like my kids are keeping me connected to the world, you know. So I can play my music to their grandkids, and they can work.
Definitely. And they're going to continue that work as well. Like I said, I know I've got to wrap up by 4 o'clock. So definitely before we wrap up, I did want to find out from both of you if you could share your words of encouragement and your words of positivity to share with our listening audience from around the world and things of that nature. So I'll start with you, King Wojak, and then I'll come to Tobin, since Tobin was my initial guest and was the first guest, and then I'll end with him as well. So definitely, King Wojak, if you could share any words of positivity or definitely words of encouragement that you would like to share with our listeners, I would greatly appreciate that.
Of course. Thank you, Mr. Lee. First off, before I say it was an honor to be on the show with Mr. Tobin, and as a community from Washington State, we want to send our deep and utmost prayers to you and your health situation, and that you may overcome it and everything will be peachy cream. We'll see you in 10 years for sure, producing and creating and getting and building the network that you are already built and making it bigger. Thank you for this network and this you know this program that's been coming on that I've been part of a few times now, and I feel I'm almost like a home guest. I feel so I have to get I think start stepping up my background and all my stuff, the Mark Womack show with Mr. Lee and all that. But I want to say to people out there that are listening to just take a deep breath. I know it's hard because we got the mask on. You said a key thing: comedians are the last true real speakers, and I struggle with wanting to go down here to this comedy house and be a comedian because I'm funny is all get out. But what I learned from Rakim is that he's no joke, and he's not a comedian, so don't take this. And so I learned like being an MC is no joke. So I embrace that. And that's what makes me write serious about the serious conditions of our people. But I want people to say to themselves, just breathe deep. Don't believe the hype like Public Enemy. I'm going to all the hip hop scholars that taught me how to be who I am today. Don't believe the hype. 911 was a joke. So is COVID. You know what I mean? Just eat good, take care of yourself, follow Dr. CB and all his health recommendations because he was on to something. And just love your neighbor and connect more physically, because I killed my social media. I killed my Facebook and Instagram because I just got tired of the BS that was coming through that feed, and it was all negativity. And for 3 weeks now, I've been clear of social media, and I feel so great. I don't know how to even grow from there. I can't share anything now because I have so much to share, but I just don't have no social media. But I do have a YouTube. Follow me at King Wojak on YouTube. Follow me at kingwouniverse.com, which is my website, and send all your donations and anything you want to do to help a young at heart, struggling artist out to become who I need to be and to do the things to create change in society that needs to be. And we need an artist for president, not no weirdo publicans and old ass rich people. So we need a real artist. We need somebody who has knowledge of the arts and how to bring people together through music and healing and vibration. And I'm praying for the entire world. And I know we're going into dark times, but keep your head up. Like Pac said, hip hop runs the nation, man, runs the world. And I'm part of it. King Wojak.
Appreciate you, King Wojak. Definitely great hearing your voice. As always, you always give us some great insight. I'm thinking that we might have to have Tobin run for president, and we don't care about the health issues and things of that nature. So maybe we need Tobin Mueller for president, and we can start that campaign right now. But Tobin, as we're wrapping up the show, if you would love to share your final thoughts as well as any words of encouragement and positivity that you would like to share as well, we would love to hear that.
You are your life. You are the ones that define who you are, and it doesn't make any difference who's the president. Our parents were wonderful. Some of our parents weren't wonderful. We can't blame them. I think we can thank them for both the negative and the positive examples they gave us. I can thank my relatives who weren't kind to show me how not being kind wasn't a good thing. I can thank my mom, who thought I was the greatest human being on earth, to give me courage. But integrity only comes from you. It's not something that's given, and no leader, no law, nothing can give that to you. And so you have to find the courage, you have to find integrity, and define who you are. And it doesn't make any difference who's on the Supreme Court or who's the president, because you run your life. And that's how we have to build our garden in the backyard, rear our children. Being a parent is the most revolutionary leader in the world.
Definitely agree with you on that. Great thought. Yeah. Definitely agree with you on that. And you're right. That's a way that we can address is definitely having those kind of mindsets like you were talking about and things of that nature. By the way, Tobin, it's been my great honor to have you as a guest, to have King Wojak back on again. I definitely hope to have you back on again as well, Tobin. You definitely shared a lot about your past, what you went through with 9/11, what you're going through with the fighting with what's going on with your lungs and things of that nature, but also your rich musical career, your environmental use of the arts, or your use of the arts to talk about the environment, I should say, and a number of other things that you have shared with us today. So definitely we have shows from around the world, and we have folks that listen from around the world, including some to go back and listen in past broadcasts as well. So I'm definitely going to urge them to go back and check out this interview, because I do think that you brought us a lot of knowledge and things that were needed to be heard at this day and time. So I want to thank you for being my guest. Thank King Wojak for being my guest as well. And we'll be back on later on doing some other shows, but definitely wanted to thank both of you for being on this show and for being my guest on this particular afternoon on the radio show with Marc Lee. And I'm going to bring up right now our theme song that we use for this show, and I might bring up a couple of commercials of other shows as well. So definitely appreciate both of you for showing that piece to us and all of that. So right now we've got a show about winning with some of the things that she's doing, fighting cerebral palsy, and she does a show here. So I'm going to bring her up and show her clip as well as some of our other shows, and then close with our theme music as well. But right now, this is the show we've got going on with Win Charles. Well, hopefully, folks will be jumping over to our next show, which of course is Mullins Memories and Music, coming your way in just a matter of a few minutes, and everything of that nature on today. And then, of course, I'll be back on Wednesday with the online dinner party, talking to my friend Wayusi Baruki and a couple of others that may be joining me on that show as well. But right now, we're going to turn this off, and we've definitely had some great dialogue and learned a lot about what folks' reflections are around theater, around the arts, around activism, around voting, and around a number of other things that are going on. So on that note, we'll end this particular show, and we hope to catch you later on this afternoon in just a matter of a minute or so on the Mullins Music and Memories.